the Light Labyrinth project, and it is amazing, so don't miss this. Kirby Seid.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's really wonderful and an honor to be here and to present some of the information and experiences that I've had. Basically, the main thing, my main job in the world is I connect the crystal kingdom with the human kingdom. I'd also like to introduce Michelle Nocerino. You want to stand up, Michelle? Thank you. And Michelle is the caretaker and guardian of Shana Ra, the ancient crystal skull. By the way, Michelle is a fantastic healer, a truth teller, speaker herself. And tonight I'll be talking about Shana Ra. I'll be talking about Michelle's father, Fr. Nick Nocerino, a teacher and friend of mine. Nick passed away in 2004 in the spring at the age of 76. And I'll have some stories about him and share some of his research. I'll talk about crystal skulls in general from a shamanic point of view. I've been studying and practicing shamanism for probably about 25 to 30 years, and the primary tradition that I have studied through is through the teacher plant medicines. So that's my training. I'm also going to introduce some of the light technology that I've been working with some friends at Apple Computer and the Exploratorium in San Francisco. We'll do a demonstration meditation tonight with this. Also, I'm going to have a 16-minute video of Nick Nocerino with some of his research that was done back in the 70s and 80s. So you'll have a taste of who Nick was in that sensing. So, Shana Ra, let's see. This works, yes. Ancient crystal skull, discovered in Guerrero, Mexico by Fr. Nick Nocerino back in the early 90s. And the interesting thing about Shana Ra was, Shana Ra was discovered by Nick through, at the time it was called psychic archaeology. Today they call it a type of remote viewing, so I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that process. The process where one bilocates one's consciousness from here to another location in search of information, in search of objects, in search of events, people, this kind of thing. And Nick had a very close relationship with sacred objects. He had been searching and researching for sacred objects all over the world, not just crystal skulls, but many types of objects. And he had a premonition that Shana Ra, he didn't know the name of the crystal skull at the time, was calling him somewhere in Mexico. And through the process of continual practice of this type of remote viewing, he got information as to the location and the geographical markers of the location that Shana Ra was at. He gave this to an archaeological team at the time, and 2 months later, they called him and they said, "Nick, I think we found something that is very close to what you were describing." They opened up the mound site. It was an Olmec Toltec mound site, and they found these huge jars, and in these jars were crystal skulls, one of which was Shana Ra. Now, the name Shana Ra comes from Nick. Nick worked with 6 healing guides, and the overseer of the healing guides was an oracle, not only a master healer, but an oracle over the other healing guides that he had worked with. So he decided that Shana Ra had similar attributes. And so he named this crystal skull right here, Shana Ra. I'm sure Shana Ra has had many names in the past. Artifacts, we know from the Olmec Toltec it could be anywhere from 500 to 2,000 years old. But many of these types of artifacts travel from civilization to civilization. They're traded, they're stolen, they're gifted, and into the next, civilization. Anybody see that movie, The Red Violin? It's an amazing movie, and it's that kind of transition and incarnation that a power object has. It almost has a life of its own. It knows where its next master incarnation, caretaker will come from. And Shannara was simply calling Nick in that sense, and Nick responded to the call. Actually, I'm going to, there's a picture of Michelle, if you haven't seen her from the other. What? All right, here we go. Continue. All right. In terms of crystal skulls, from a shamanic point of view, the crystal skull represents the evolution, the vehicle for the evolution of human consciousness. And in shamanic terms, the journey is from the incarnation from the human animal to the human being to the spiritual human. And crystal skulls relate back to the ancestors, those who came before us, who held wisdom and knowledge. And they even relate back even further to the ancient ones. And in mythologies, the ancient ones represented the gods, the beings who had a lot to do with putting human DNA on our planet, shall we say, the ETs in our current perspective, this type of thing. Modern shamans and modern healers and teachers use crystal skulls as a reflection device, as a meditation device, as a portal to the other dimensions. And in the sense of reflection, every spiritual discipline, method, means has a few similar properties. And one of them is brain activation. So you go through a set of rituals, incantations, methods, and means to create an altered state of reality. And the thing about the crystal skulls is, as a reflection device, if you activate the temporal lobes of the crystal skull, you will be hooking up and activating your own temporal lobes. And the temporal lobes have to do with opening up the imaginal realm, the realms of the dream world, very consciously. Okay? So that's an example of how the crystal skulls were used. In shamanic terms also, the crystal skulls were considered to be part of the family, part of the tribe, not just an object for recording information, but they were introduced to new family members, marriages, updated in terms of the news of the tribes, this kind of thing. And shamans would know how to put information into the skulls through a type of psychometry, through ritual. And then they would pass that crystal skull on to their apprentices when they were ready, as a way of passing on the mantle of their teachings and of their culture. So this is, in general, how crystal skulls have been used in shamanic cultures. Nick had three important points about understanding crystal skulls. The first thing was the quartz itself. Now, the quartz, all three of these quartz beings here are roughly 90 to 110 million years old. They act as storage devices. They store information. So they've been storing cosmic information, earth information, all kinds of information. And the trick is to access this information through a set of rituals, through an activation of sound and ritual. And so you've got the quartz itself. And those of you who work with crystals know that crystals have their own information and personality. I'm concerned about defining what Nick would call skull consciousness. Skull consciousness is, you might say, from the crystal kingdom, an ambassador. They're the type of crystal that you would walk by and they would be talking to you. They would be yakking. You can't shut them up sometimes. this kind of thing. They're communication devices, in that sense, from the crystal realm. So that is an aspect of crystal consciousness or skull consciousness, whether or not it's in the form of a skull or not. It's kind of a speaker of the mineral kingdom. So it's the property of the quartz. The second thing is, was the person or persons who were carving this sacred object, were they just doing something mundane, or were they actually channeling something of the divine? Were they transcending their own ego personality and doing something in a very sacred way and imprinting that object with that type of spiritual power? And imprinting their knowledge and sense of community and truth into the objects. So that in and of itself can be an empowering to the power object. And third, how was this object used? So we know that Max and Shana Ra, over many, probably thousands of years, was used as a healing and as an oracle device. There is a template in the resonant field of this quartz that captures the way it was being used by its surrounding culture and people who used it. And because this has been done for many, many hundreds, if not thousands of years, this template exists around in the field of these objects that is much more easy to tap into. So you could have a relatively new crystal with skull consciousness in it that would be very powerful. You could have a relatively new crystal that was carved by somebody in a sacred manner. I've certainly been around very ancient objects that didn't have any life to them at all, that somehow the carver or the culture that it came from was just something very mundane and something very simple, and it didn't really have that kind of juice to it. But the thing about these ancient crystal skulls, and particularly Max and Shana Ra, is they have all three. They have all three of those attributes in a very strong way. They were used in this sacred manner, that they have crystal skull consciousness in them, and whoever carved them put their juice, their life force, with a sacred intention into them. Okay, I want to say a little bit about Nick, and then I'm going to be playing a little 16-minute video. This video is available through Michelle, and it's a much longer 1-hour video called Dreams, Doorways, and Dimensions. And you won't actually see Shana Ra in this video because this was probably done in the mid-80s, and Shana Ra didn't come into Nick's possession until the early 90s. But Max is in this particular video. Let me show a picture of Nick. Okay, so in the top left corner we have Shana Ra on the left. We have a modern crystal skull. It was a 57-pound crystal skull. The quartz was from Russia. It's optical grade. It's interesting, that particular piece of quartz came from a military stockpile from Russia. It was going to be used for missile guidance system, computer chips, this kind of thing for war, and it was gotten when the Russians in the 80s and 90s were letting go of some of their assets. And now it's being used for peace and magic for humanity. And on the right of Nick, in this far left corner, is a skull called Ichabod. And here's Nick working with Shana Ra. He's scrying. He's working with psychometry, receiving information and imprinting information into Shana Ra through his hands. On the top right here is Nick working with probably one of the most famous crystal skulls, the Mitchell Hedges skull. Nick was a teacher's teacher. Many of he's known to be more the godfather of crystal skulls because back in the 50s he was searching for these ancient artifacts. And the thing about Nick, I learned, was Nick tried to embrace logic and reason and a scientific methodology as best as he could, he knew he was going into the mystical, into the magical, where rationality and logic don't necessarily hold together. So he was willing to go into the unknown without abandoning rationality, without abandoning the known. He would take it as far as he could. He created protocols and methodologies for people to work psychically with these sacred objects. Then he recorded all the findings, and I'll be reading you the findings. Many, many hundreds of students, other teachers, lay people, anyone he could get to do this meditative protocol with an artifact, to psychically tune to the artifact and then record their impressions of it. You know, Nick, to me, he had an incredible sense of humor. He was foolish in a way. And you might say that he embodied the archetype of the artist. The artist goes into the unknown and searches. And when that artist finds something in the unknown, they bring it back. And that's the difference. It's easy to kind of write off this reality and want to get out of here. But to go into the unknown and find something, and then to find something and create something, a vehicle to communicate what you have found back into society and to share it, is a true function of the artist. And this is what Nick was after. He was not just about going out into these alternate realms, but he was actually looking for something, seeking something that was yet to be known, and then bringing it back and showing other people how to do this as well. I'm going to read to you some of, I'll just tell you a few other things. Personally, Nick was a friend and a teacher of mine. And personally, he taught me what really matters. I mean, I actually saw him in the late 80s in Sedona get up in front of about 300 people talking about crystal skulls. And he started seeing the sort of mania that was happening on that level. And he basically said, look, you guys, take a moment and forget crystal skulls. Just forget it. You know, think about what matters to you and what matters in life, what really matters. And he focused this on people. And he did this with everything. Whenever I came to his house and there were visitors and guests, the first thing he would do is he would feed them. And he said, feed the body first, then the mind, and then the soul. And he practiced this always. People were always welcome, and people were always well-fed at his house. He said that if you get your priorities straight in life, you're going to manifest most of what you want. That's one of the secrets of manifestation, he told me. Just get your priorities straight. Nick believed that these ancient crystal skulls were a doorway to greater understanding of ourselves and our place in the universe and all its dimensions. Okay, so some of the findings of the research over 20 years, which ended probably in the early 90s. Now, I want to remind you that this was a time when there was no internet, you couldn't Google crystal skulls and find out all this information. A lot of this information, you're going to go, oh, okay, I know that. Well, back in the 70s and 80s, you know, people didn't know this, and this was a very taboo subject, the fringe of the fringe. So, here's the things that he came up with back then. That they acted like computers, and they hold immense amounts of information about how they were used and what they saw. And that each skull had a color code, a sound code, and a light code unique to it that activated its information to the viewer. Color opens dimensions within the skulls, generally red for UFOs, greens and blues for underwater, no color to yellow for inner earth. And by activating those different lights or colors or sounds or a combination of them, all the individuals working with the skull can gain access to different dimensions of time and space, and in this way affect their own consciousness. That the skulls were directly connected with the inner earth and humanity's prehistory of over 30 to 40,000 years ago. That there seemed to be a connection with what was referred to as UFOs. And the interesting part, however, is that they seem to come and go to and from the inner part of the earth and the oceans. and that there were 13 crystal skulls in each of the different ancient skulls that he worked with, indicating that there may be 13 important geographical areas that were coming to, that knowledge was stored. And he saw this vision way before any of the mythologies of the 13 crystal skulls became popular. However, he strongly believed that there was only one master stone or skull that knew what all the others knew, and that bringing the skulls together would facilitate in seeing a path to peace within humanity. Now, he didn't think that it would in and of itself bring about peace, but that this would be a reflection of what we had accomplished on this plane in terms of peace. Okay, I'm going to play, actually, let me just do a couple more. This is Max and Shana. It is such a rare event to have both these crystal skulls, and I can't tell you how many promoters have tried to get both these crystal skulls under the same roof. And, Tib was just had the juice to do it. We're also very fortunate on both accounts of having them here because, Nick passed away in 2004, and many museums and private collectors asked to purchase Shana Ra. And after debate among the family, they decided that they wanted to have Shana Ra still available for the public, for people to work with Shana Ra directly. And I had the opportunity from 2000 to about 2006 to carry Shana Ra and facilitate experiences for people. And then the movie came out, the Indiana Jones movie came out in 2007, and Chris, his wife, was kind of freaked out about it. She's going, this is the pinnacle of commercialism and exploitation, and she saw the circus was in town, and she really didn't want Shana Ra to become a part of that, so she was going to withdraw Shana Ra from public access altogether. And then Michelle stepped up, and she said, Dad really wanted this to be available for people, so I'm going to take this over. I'm going to take on the mantle of his wishes and continue this. So without Michelle, Shana Ra would not be here today available to work with. And here's Joanne and Nick. Back, I believe, in the 70s when Joanne received Max, she was taken aback by this object, and for many years, not knowing what to do with it, she met Nick, and Nick sort of put her on track, told her what the significance of this valuable artifact is and how she could use it and what she could do with it, and how she could, really do good with this object. And I think Nick would be so proud of Joanne after probably 30 years of bringing Max all over the world, and she continues to do so. So, I really thank everyone for participating in this particular event and participating for those of you who have and even haven't to have private sessions with Shana Ra. It really continues a tradition that is very important to continue. Okay, so I'm going to play the video now, and so you can have a direct experience with Nick. And I just have to figure out how to end this. Whoops.
But particularly these ancient human-sized carved crystal skulls are computers. How they're loaded with information, I do not know. I do know we are trying desperately
Can we have
to
the lights
take this
down?
information out perhaps, and we believe we are right for the betterment of you and I and others within the world.
We welcome you to a time of discovery, the world of crystal skulls.
This, I believe, was done in the mid-'80s.
Dreams, doorways, dimensions. Your host, Fr. Nick Nocerino, renowned authority in the fields of crystal and crystal skulls, and founder-director of the Crystal Skull Society International.
In order to better understand what we do, we call what we do scrying. Scrying may mean nothing to the modern New Age person, but in my time, scrying meant crystal gazing, and that's what the New Ages call it, crystal gazing. Scrying, though, has a great deal to do with other things besides crystals. Any polished surface was used for scrying. A brass plate, an obsidian rock. For instance, this is an ancient crystal ball. The entire outside surface is left rough, the inside is polished, and it is through this part of the polished section that the prophet or the seer, the scryer as we call them, looks to determine the information they need for the past, the present, or the future. Now, scrying instruments come in all sizes. They come as small as this rubellite tourmaline, or as small as this rutile crystal. And this is a very old scrying tool from South America, an amethyst bar. Here is another scrying tool, a crystal. Carnelian is often and is an ancient tool used in scrying, as is hematite. But mostly we're interested in crystal skulls. This here piece of solid quartz crystal would probably make a skull about this size or a little smaller. This is a replica of the Mayan skull. The Mayan skull is much more different than the quartz crystal that the ancient would have used, and not necessarily quartz crystal, but whatever polished stone he used, over Max that you've seen earlier, in that this one not only is smaller, as you can see, but it is carved different. Look at the templates. This area is used for scrying. This area is very difficult to scry in. Look at the eyes. The optics carved in here are not in here. Yet the eyes in both skulls can be used for scrying. Both skulls, for that matter, nearly all skulls, the eyes would give images. These images may be of things far beyond our comprehension. It is not even sure if we are hallucinating or if the images are somehow imposed within the stone. Let's take Max, for instance. Max gives you a clear vision here. Max gives you a clear vision here across the eyes. And as you work with Max, you get a direct pathway to scry right through the top of the temple, moving over through the right side back of the head. Yet we have a cap in here, which we call a white cap, and we have a white cap here. This means this quartz crystal was taken as close to its matrix as possible. The matrix is the stone that's holding it in place. Whereas in the Mayan skull, the matrix is completely removed. This skull becomes very easy to work with. This skull becomes much more difficult, requires more concentration, more manipulation of the hands, which we call psychometry. Psychometry is the touching of the object or the touching of the energy field of the object and picking up images within the mind or within the object, which go into all of the dimensions of your senses. For instance, all of these skulls you see in front of you produce odor. They are clear audio. They produce sound within our minds, within our inner ears. We have feelings. We know things that we did not know we knew before we worked with them. But the most interesting thing of all is that no matter which skull we are working with, we seem to get some idea of perhaps legends. And what are these legends? For instance, we look in here and we see an ocean. We look in here and we see an ocean. We look into this skull, which is a replica also of a Mayan skull, and we see an ocean. We look in here and we see an ocean. Yet this is not a crystal skull. Why should it show the same things? It is hard to determine why they show the same things, but all crystal skulls show three specific things of interest and identity. One is a life form, some civilization, some culture that lives within the water, within the ocean. We see dolphins, we see whales, we see things that don't exist, mermaids, merwogs. We see gigantic reptiles that move along, and no one even can imagine the size of them, but looking into the crystal, they seem to be gigantic. We see them in here, we see them in here, we see them in here. Then another thing happens. We see within the skulls a very interesting thing, and that is people who live inside of what we would say is the earth, caves within caves with their own daylight, their own sunlight, their own moonlight. But far beyond that, we have another aspect that is perhaps the weirdest of all. There are craft, or what we call craft, that fly into the skulls from one end to the other, fly out of it, fly into the ocean, fly into the earth, or just land upon the earth, and we call these things UFOs, for lack of a better knowledge of what they are. And as you will see in some of the photographs of some of the skulls, we don't know what else to call them. What are these things? What are these things that one could look into and have played back memories that you haven't thought of in 40 or 50 years? Your childhood dreams that you had at the age of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. What is it that they can show you? A battle between the Egyptians and the Assyrians? Aztecs fighting Toltecs? Things that you never exceeded, you never even thought of seeing, you can see in the different skulls. You become part of it. You feel as if you're in the ocean moving. You feel as if you're taking off into space and flying from star to star. You feel the water coming across the land, and you see this earth in this skull changing 3 times, being flooded. People fleeing into the sky, people fleeing into the ocean, people fleeing into the earth. This other skull, twice. The Mitchell-Hedges skull, 4 times. The earth changes. Now, are we hallucinating? Again, we must always ask this question. Or, as we close our eyes, are we just seeing what we are creating in our imaginations? If this is true, why then do people in New York, or people in Paris, or people in London, or people in Rio de Janeiro, or people in Hawaii, or people in Kitchener, Canada, all see the same things? Why are all the scryers, all the mediums, all the channels that you use that word today, channel, which we call scryers or mediums, Why do they all see the same thing? Particularly when they have never seen a skull before, particularly when they have never touched the skull. Now, of course, we have the method whereby people will touch the skull and close their eyes and allow their senses to take hold, and they read out what they see, or feel, or smell, or taste, or hear. And we have the other group that never sees a skull, but tunes in on it from 1,000 miles away, or 10,000 miles away for that matter, as most channels do today. Yet they come up with the same information. Are they all reading the same book? There are not that many books about crystal skulls. Are they all talking to the same people? It puzzles me. It should puzzle you. Of the many skulls I have seen and worked with, of course, the Mayan skull and the Mitchell-Hedges skull are perhaps the clearest. And perhaps those skulls are the best that we have photographed. But yet in the amethyst skulls, some of them as large as these, not only as small as this one, which is 18th century, late 18th century, we see the same things. We see the perversions. The perversions we call those things which man did, which did not apply to the skull. For instance, we see the sacrifices. We see the destruction of life and land, of buildings. We see battles. Perhaps, if we knew how, if we could understand the code to going deeper into the skulls, we would be able to see and understand more. It is very possible when one closes their eyes to almost find themselves, when they're working with a skull, drawn in. And it always happens that if you are closing your eyes as well as if you are leaving your eyes open, 3 specific colors come in when you are scrying: green, blue, and red. Yet, as your brain receives green, red, and blue and converts it into other colors, the skulls seem to take the colors that you may feed into them, such as red or green or blue, and convert them into gold, purples, indigos, violets. And often when you're not even putting colors in, you are just scrying, you are just looking, all of a sudden you will see rays coming out of the skull with no possible light source whereby these colors can be coming from. Often we work in black boxes. We have the skull framed in, all light sources are checked. Yet color is sent out as if the skull itself determines what color should be sent out with what thought the scryer has, or the person who is doing psychometry, or the person, if you will, who is doing quiet meditation by touching. I do not count meditation by those who do not see or touch. Yet a great many of the reports we are getting on crystal skulls and on crystals are coming from these people.
Nick, with all of your years of study and research on the skulls, have you drawn any conclusions?
Oh my God, yes. Whether they're fact or not, I don't know. I believe that all the skulls are one form or another of an intricate computer, and in their own way, they're all intricate computers. We're positive that nearly all skulls that we are going to deal with and that we have dealt with are made of rock quartz crystal. We believe that all skulls that we will see, as well as those we have seen, because nearly everyone we've seen shows UFO activity, or what we call UFO activity. We really don't know what those crafts are that we see in the skull. We believe that each skull has some relationship with an underwater civilization. We believe that it's possible some of the skulls have a relationship not only with an underwater civilization, but with a civilization that may even exist within our Earth. I know, as fantastic as that sounds, I'm going to put myself on a limb and say that it's possible there is a society or living within the Earth. I believe that each skull has a power unto itself, that it records everything it sees and can be tapped to give out certain information. And this may happen for thousands of years. And I believe all skulls have a color code, a light code, a sound code, and that they can be activated to give you different dimensions of time from these colors, light, or sound, or a combination of all of them. I would say that dealing with the last 5 skulls I've worked with, and which we haven't even talked about, including some of the contemporary skulls, light, color, and sound also has a tendency to activate memory banks within the stone and give us pictures of things that are well beyond our, let's say, before prehistory.
Okay, just to give you a sample of that. By the way, Nick's later work had a lot more to do with looking into our possible futures with the crystal skulls, not just the past. And you know, modern metaphysics. There's a theory in modern metaphysics that, you know, we are at a point now where we can't resolve a lot of the turning point conditions of our environment, our society, our financial systems. They're all in collapse. And the answer to that is locating positive futures, alternate realities, and then bilocating our own consciousness into those dimensions. So it's not about fixing what's here, it's about drawing the experience from a whole other reality that's possible into this one. And crystal skulls are a wonderful way of accessing those future possibilities and therefore drawing it into this reality. I just want to give you an example of how a session with Shauna Ra might go. A woman from Pittsburgh came to us about 5 or 6 years ago. She wanted to spend about an hour meditation with Shauna Ra. I put her in our bedroom, and an hour later she came out and I said, well, what happened? What happened for you? And she said, you know, in Pittsburgh I have got a nice family, a great job, a community, but something's missing. I can see the end of my life. I can see it's being fine, but there's something I've come here to do, and I don't quite know what it is. And when I meditated with Shauna Ra, I saw 2 other lifetimes where I came to the point where I chose the known rather than risk going into the unknown of what I'm here to do. And when I saw this, I realized I incarnated again this time to actually step forward and cross into that bridge. She moved to California. I actually lost contact with her, but she moved to California, and she intended to work on the healing arts and be an artist and a healer. And so these are some of the kinds of things when you work with crystal skulls, when you work with Shauna Ra, when you work with Max, that's potentiated here. Before I move on to the light labyrinth and the meditation with that, let me see here if I can.
I believe that...
Whoops. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Is there any way to date the skulls accurately as far as how old they are?
Okay, there's a question that's dating the carving itself. We know that the crystal itself is anywhere from 90 to 100 million years old, depending on the location. Brazilian quartz or South American quartz is usually in that timing. Arkansas quartz is about 40 million years old. Stuff from Africa is usually about 150 to 200 million years old, as far as quartz is concerned. In terms of the dating of the carving, the only reliable methods and means for doing that has been it to a place where they can microscopically look at the surface structure of the crystal and see what type of tooling was used to carve this thing, and if it matches certain dates. This was done at the Smithsonian with Shannara, Max, and several other skulls, probably 25 years ago. And, the situation was such that they were trying to debunk these things as well as being ancient. And with Shannara and with Max, they couldn't debunk them. They found old tool marks on them, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. You could carve a crystal skull and then put old tool marks on it. I mean, back then, why would you do so? But now you could possibly want to do that. And they didn't say anything, because if they couldn't debunk it, there wasn't any reason for them to give credence to the oldness of the skull and put their reputation on the line. But so it remains a mystery in that sense. And a lot of these artifacts were not acquired, shall we say, in academic terms. So fortunately, we do have evidence with Shannara, pictures and people that were there in terms of the location of the burial mound site that it was found. So at least it kind of gives it that much of a reference. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Is there any explanation for the cheekbone protrusions in Shannara?
Any explanation for the cheekbone protrusions in Shannara? Nick said that in his lifetime he examined at least 40 to 50 ancient crystal skulls. Most of them were about the size of your fist. There was probably only a handful that was human size. And there's no other, there's sort of a whole lineage of crystal skulls, ancient crystal skulls that look alike. Let's see. The quick answer to your question is no. Characteristically, what is this reflecting? And looking at a lot of these crystal skulls, a lot of them kind of look alike. None of them look like Shannara. Shannara is almost mask-like, you might say, and almost not skull-like in that sensing too. So there is that uniqueness about it. So I don't have, and neither did Nick have an answer for that, why in those jars these other skulls were found that were very different and hollowed out, and only Shannara looked the way that Shannara looks among the other crystal skulls that were found in that area. Yes?
The first thing I thought is feminine, like flush, like to show,
Yes.
and Shannara is feminine divine energy, right?
So the comment was Shannara is divine energy, and that is significant of the jaw structure. Seems it.
It just, to me, it reminded me of blush, like a woman puts on blush.
Oh, okay.
And Metatron says she's divine, or Shannara is divine feminine energy.
Yes.
So that's the first thing I thought when I saw the cheeks.
Yes. That's an interesting observation for you. Back here.
Kirby,
Yes.
thank you for the wonderful presentation. There is a premise that I'd like to put out. There was a time on planet Earth when the frequency, the vibration fell on Earth. And before that, let's say a wise council of beings off planet, different factions made from different parts of creation. Or let's say this part of creation knew that the vibration in the future would fall on Earth.
Yes.
And that the original skulls given to Earth and other factions or soul groups would fashion these after their exact craniums.
Yes.
They're from a council of beings, let's say.
Yes.
Extremely wise beings. And this was a way that people on Earth could still communicate with, in essence, their early tribes
Yes.
when they left. And it was, in essence, a way to
Yes, and a reminder, a reflection, a breadcrumb as to what one's origins are in terms of possibly genetic and spiritual. Yes. A lot of the crystals have, look like a combination, a hybrid of ETs and human and even animal. So there's a lot of reference to what you're saying as possibilities. There's a whole series that one of Nick's students has that of the hollowed out skulls that look dolphin in nature, and the dolphin consciousness is associated strongly with Sirius as well. So a lot of people who meditate with those have a remembrance of their connection with Sirius as well. So
Be able to maintain a communication
yes.
still with these higher dimensions, even because of the nature of the crystals being programmed.
Yes. For those of you who, we were talking earlier, for those of you who have heard a channel named Bashar, who's an ET, I had a reading with Bashar about Shannara, and they said that Shannara's, one of a past incarnation with Shannara, its name was called Uxmal, and that in that culture, Shannara was used as a communication device with the Pleiades. That they seem to indicate that Shannara was not from the Pleiades, but used in resonance communication with Pleiadians, and that the information, therefore, in Shannara actually had to do more with agricultural, how to do agricultural information for great crops and stuff like that. But that was relevant for those particular times. Yes.
What is the connection then with the channel he's talking about? Oh, thank you. Okay. Thanks, Charlie. The talking fellow, can you hear me? So what is the connection between the sort of the crystalline grid and the crystals in Arkansas? Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, that's better.
Great.
So crystalline grid, skulls, and how, and for instance, the crystals in Arkansas, and do these skulls, are they used as communication tools with, as far as that whole big picture universal kind of thing is?
Yeah, I believe crystal skulls, again, with skull consciousness, are the sort of the front lines, the ambassadors, the ones who contact a certain type of human consciousness and invite that human consciousness. So they've surrendered their form, in a sense, to reflect our form as a way of saying, hey, you're looking at yourself in a way. And yes, it's crystals are holographic in nature. They can communicate with each other long distances outside of time and space, and learn and communicate with each other in that sense. Nick asked, why is it that somebody in Paris and somebody in England and somebody here get the same thing? Well, in a sense, they're all tuned to a similar vision. In that sensing. So there is that connection with that level of gridding.
And then I just have a backup question on that.
Yeah.
Is, are they appearing now? Do you have any ideas around why they are now being found and coming back up into our reality? Do you think that's maybe a sign that maybe we're ready to start playing with that level?
Absolutely. And comes with that a sense of the trickster. Is this real? Is it not real? Well, the bottom line is only the person using that particular artifact, skull, or crystal can determine that. What is a record keeper for one person may not be a record keeper for another person. And so you can't simply say this is a record keeper or not a record keeper. You can make some generalizations when a lot of people work with a crystal or not. But but it's a challenge. It's not, there's no neon sign saying this is your crystal. You have to kind of meet it halfway in that sense. And it is a reflection of something's happening, a shift in human consciousness. We are readying ourselves for an emergence. We are the chrysalis that a butterfly is about ready to emerge. And even though it looks like we're all, the caterpillar is dying in that sense, and the caterpillar consumes, 100 times its weight in its environment, only to take that in and reemerge. So we are in the process of that reemergence, I would say, and the reflection of crystals is, and these types of artifacts and the activation of these artifacts are a reflection of that. Yes, they're not necessarily a cause of that, but they're a reflection of it. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks. So last year, about this time, I had an experience with Max in a session. It was I had no idea they had masculine, feminine energy, and Max's was evidently masculine. And then yesterday, I had my first experience with Shana Ra. And I started menopausing, so what's up with that? No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking, a little laughter
You're
there. Just joking
menopausing?
with everybody. We wake everybody up there. We're all getting tired. No.
It's a little more information than we wanted here.
I know, I'm just joking. But I did have a session, but no, it wasn't as spectacular as the one with Max, just joking. But no, my question is, I'm listening to all these events that are going on, like the cardinal, I don't even know what it's called, the cardinal
Yes.
symbol, and these astrological meteorite events, and
Yes.
everybody who's really intuitive and sensitive is picking these up. When these events happen, do the skulls seem to, I don't know, emanate a different type of energy, maybe from the keepers, such as Michelle? Does she report things like that ever happening? Or maybe, I don't know. Oh, there she is. Hi, Michelle. Hey, how you doing? I don't know.
Do I report things like that? There are definitely ceremonies that are performed during the different phases and whatnot. But do I record? No. Did that answer your question?
It's all related. It's all a reflection of different aspects of the change that's going on our planet, on our plane, in human consciousness. Absolutely. There's not a one-to-one direct relationship. Sometimes if it's a polarity. Sometimes it's different angles. Sometimes it's a one-on-one reflection. But it's all happening. Yes.
In response to your question, though, there are other crystal skull guardians, and through these phases and transition periods, there's definitely a change in the skulls, and we connect. It's not uncommon for us to, connect. What's that word? Anyway, and do the work. But there is, yes, definitely a change in the. If you're asking if there is a change in. There's a change in energy, but if you're asking if there's even a change in the look of the skulls, it changes.
Yeah, physically.
Is that what a physical change? Yes, definitely there's energy changes and shifts. Thank you.
Yes, in the front.
I am very intrigued about the movable mandible. Is this working?
Yes.
The movable mandible
Yes.
in the crystal Hadges one.
Yes.
And also whether that one is the master skull. That's my question.
Okay. So the question is, you're fascinated with the movable mandible on the Mitchell Hedges skull, and is that one the master skull? I didn't think so for a long time, and the first time I met the Mitchell Hedges skull in Sedona, it's probably about 5 or 6 years ago at Angel Valley, I was stunned. I immediately saw future pictures of our relationships with what we call extraterrestrials on this planet. And I was just amazed by that presence. Is it a master skull? I believe it is. Is it the master skull? I don't know. The mandible, I often have crystal skulls carved by different artists, and I've done different, mandibles and things like that. I actually try to avoid it because they're very, they break so easily, and it's hard to transport and stuff like that. But yes, the mandible is a fascinating aspect. You could work with that as a tool in and of itself. Could it have? It could have talked. Yes, that does imply, communication in that sense, open communication. Yeah. Okay. One last question before we actually start the meditation. Anybody? That's it. Going once, going twice. Sold. Silence. Okay. I'm going to. Nick mentioned color and sound and this kind of thing, so we have put together in honor of Nick something called the Light Labyrinth Project. And Nick introduced me to Randall Fonts from the Exploratorium, who's a light artist for over 30 years, Darren Gibbs from Apple Computer, a number of other engineers. And basically what we do is we create light compositions. So we take lighting effects and combine them to create a composition similar to how a musician would create a piece of music. And the object that we're lighting in this case are large quartz crystals. Light goes into the crystal and bounces around 3 or 4 or 5 times, creating complementary colors, creating color separation, creating really interesting visual effects. And what you're looking at is every inclusion, every fracture, every veil. It's not a flaw. It's a signature imprint of something that happened geologically. Plate tectonic shifts, earthquakes, magnetic pole shifts, civilizations that came and went. These are all information plates. So if you look into the crystals, you will find, in an altered state, the light compositions are designed to put you in altered state so you can see these possibilities that's the information in these crystals. Let's see. I will be doing some strobing, and the strobing is to entrain you into alpha, theta, and delta patterns of mind states. And these mind states, just to give you a brief description, because you hear all these mind states being thrown around. Our normal consciousness, if we're watching a movie at 24 to 30 frames per second, so we're looking at something that looks like it's just solid and even. When we slow that movie down to 7 to 14 cycles per second, which is in the alpha state, it's like slowing that movie down, and suddenly you're seeing higher levels of detail and resolution. You're seeing the connective events in between what we call solid events. Psychics are known to to observe reality in an alpha state and be able to see the energetic connections between things and behind things. And this is typical of an alpha state. You slow the mind even more to the theta state, 3 to 8 cycles per second. And you come into a state of mind that, theta, you have access to the Akashic records, your own collective soul records, your own the records of the collective as well. Okay, and that's how that works. You're slowing reality to the point where you can see what's in between, the liminal, what's in between realities, and in that in between opens up a whole new world of causality and possibilities. Okay, so this technology is designed to put you into those states, all right? In our longer workshops, we practice different types of gazes. There's a right brain gaze state and a left brain gaze state. So right brain, which is creativity, nonlinear thinking, this kind of thing. You will gaze into the crystals. It's a soft gaze. It's like a gestalt. You're looking at the whole crystal, or you're looking at the 3 crystals in a soft gaze, okay? A hard gaze, you're maybe looking at one point in the crystal, one solid point in the crystal. And you do a soft gaze and a hard gaze and a soft gaze and a hard gaze. We practice this back and forth until both sides of the brain is activated. And when both sides of the brain is activated, there's a balance, and the perception is really altered. It's really interesting, where you can see what's right in front of you very clearly, but you can also see very acutely what's on the periphery, Okay? This is what happens when both sides of the brain is activated in the sense. There are peripheral gazes, like you may look outside of the, you may stare at the ball, but you're looking outside of it. You're developing your peripheral vision. It's like seeing without seeing. So if I stare over there, but I'm really looking at the information over here, I'm developing a field of peripheral vision. And it's known that psychics have very strong peripheral vision. And when you think about it, what you look at straight on, you're looking at with a sense of anticipation and expectation. Okay? New information usually comes from our peripheral senses. So this is what we're developing, our peripheral vision in that sense. You know, something happened over here. The minute you looked at it, it's gone because you're looking at it with a totally different set of cognitive structures. Peripheral vision is really interesting to develop in that sense. Okay, so we will be doing some strobing, and if you have light sensitivity, I won't be doing the real aggressive strobing, but I'll do some of it. But it'll give you a chance to meditate with the color and the crystal. Just open your field of senses, relax, and just observe. It's a journey. Okay, and if the strobing bothers you, you can just close your eyes. You know, you can leave the room. I know everyone's at different sensitivities of light. By the way, the closer you can get in, the better. So you might take a moment to come in closer for this meditation. Charlie, can I have the the music on? Okay, and then can you turn the projectors off, please? And can we dim the lights, please? So we're going back in time now and practicing the ancient art of crystal gazing. This was usually done with flames and fire with crystals. But this is our high-tech version of that. Thank you.
Really? There's purple orbs just coming straight out of it.